So I was thinking, how about no weed tonight?
Why?
Well, I actually think it might be a good idea to quit.
What? Why? Alcohol is way worse.
If you were browning out from tequila every night, then I'd want to talk about that.
I take it you're referring to my occasional evening spliff.
It's your always evening spliff.
It's not like I'm waking up with a hangover every day and not getting anything done.
Well, do you get a lot done?
Idolizing productivity is just capitalism trying to get you to earn more money so that you can buy more stuff.
You know what else is unfairly idolized, though? Hello, it is I, the knowledgeable tree person, here to answer all of your marijuana-related inquiries. Am I a Kush Marie Antoinette? Am I an Ent from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings? It's hard to say for sure, although I do often feel like one of the oldest creatures to walk the Middle Earth. Marijuana is the second most commonly used psychotropic substance in the US after alcohol. In case you do not know what a psychotropic substance is, what it is a tool to protect oneself from the frankly very mixed bag that is life. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 48 million Americans used marijuana in 2019, 20% of which, or close to 10 million people, reported smoking daily or almost daily. I mean, isn't that a lot?
What's a lot?
10 million is a lot.
10 million what?
Daily smokers.
Oh.
Now, it has recently come to my attention that in the lively landscape of ways to get fucked up, marijuana occupies a unique space. This is a drug that has its own holiday, its own merchandise, and even its own movie subgenre. And the people who love weed tend to really love it. Just unabashed adoration, with none of the shame and secrecy that any self-respecting junkie typically has. In fact, criticizing marijuana, and I do not mean criticizing medical marijuana or criticizing legalization, but simply referring to one's own personal recreational use in a negative light, is often met with resistance.
I had to stop, and I've come in for some criticism for this. And I feel it's important to say that I hugely value and love cannabis. I think it's a wonderful herbal ally.
That is British historical mystery writer Graham Hancock tripping over himself in his eagerness to explain that him quitting weed was in no way weed's fault.
I don't want to blame the herb for anything.
That man is scared.
And I'm very grateful to the herb, the green goddess. Such a beautiful, sensual ally.
My God, Graham, get a grip. As of now, over half of all Americans support the legalization of recreational marijuana. PBS did a study investigating what made Americans change their minds about weed and found that one key factor was the media's shift from focusing on mostly drug trafficking to focusing on the benefits of medical marijuana. There's also an intimidating number of marijuana advocacy groups and commercial sellers that are trying to hype weed up to the general consumer. Vice reported that in Tel Aviv, marijuana advocates literally dropped packets of weed from the sky like heavenly manna for people to collect at random.
Sure, maybe weed's a bit idealized, but it can't be that bad for you. I mean, doctors prescribe it to people.
Yeah, but doctors also prescribe OxyContin and Xanax, and until very recently, lobotomies.
Well, maybe you should consider a lobotomy.
Excuse me?
I happen to use weed to treat my debilitating anxiety, and I wish you would be respectful of that.
But the super juiced up, ultra high THC stuff that most everyone smokes actually increases anxiety in the long term. There have been studies.
What makes you think you know what's best for me?
I hate to say this, but we are the same person. And the thing that helps our anxiety are SSRIs. Weed just postpones our anxiety while we're high, and then we have more of it when we're not high.
Okay, let's not refer to us as us, please. It's giving me major Gollum vibes.
Well, I would argue that what gives us Gollum vibes is the fact that you look exactly like this when you can't find your pipe.
Look, all I'm saying is that weed just isn't as bad as pharmaceuticals. It's completely natural. It grows from the ground. It's the earth's gift to us.
Cocaine is also the earth's gift to us. And so is like hemlock and ricin.
Yeah, but cocaine makes me sad. Weed never makes me sad.
But what about the times when you get too high? And then you think about how everyone you love is gonna die, and then you cry, and then you have to eat yourself out of your high, and then you end up waking up with like your elbow stuck in a pumpkin pie. Hey, you're rhyming. All right, well, anyway, I was thinking about why public attitudes towards weed are the way they are. And to understand this, I think we need to take a look at the history of pot prohibition in the United States. Hello? The two words that best describe the history of pot prohibition in the United States are 1, hilarious, and 2, racist. Two words one does not often see together, but there you are.
This may be handed to you by the friendly stranger. It contains the killer drug marijuana, a powerful narcotic in which lurks murder, insanity, death.
There is more.
A good girl until she lights a reefer. Weird orgies, wild parties, misery. Sin, degradation, insanity, vice. A puff, a party, a tragedy.
Then, of course, we have this absolute gem.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance.
Innocently they dance.
Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana. This vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe.
Tell your children, reefer madness is contagious.
Now, the racist parts. Here is the issue. When bougie French people first brought hashish over to the United States in the 1900s, everyone was relatively fine with it. But in the 1910s, the Mexican Revolution brought an influx of immigrants into the United States, many of whom used marijuana recreationally. And all of a sudden, the hysteria around the marijuana menace really kicked up a notch.
Is the Mexican nation locoed by a peculiar weed?
In the 1920s, a Texas senator testified.
All Mexicans are crazy and marijuana is what makes them crazy.
And yes, I got the Google Translate lady to say all the racist stuff because nobody should have to do this voiceover.
In the 1930s, Harry Anlinger, the commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which was the DEA's precursor, said,
Reefer makes darkies think they are as good as white men. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes.
So, yes, to put it mildly, there were some issues. And today, there is still plenty about marijuana-related legislation and messaging that, how do I put this generously? The logic behind it is quite subtle. For example, 12 states currently allow the use of recreational marijuana, but those same states have people still incarcerated for possession of marijuana. Nationwide, there are hundreds of thousands of people with criminal records because of marijuana-related charges, and a disproportionate number of them are people of color. And this, by the way, is not the same as saying that simply more people of color use or sell weed, because then they would not call it disproportionate. And finally, while half of all states approve the use of marijuana for the treatment of severe nausea, certain types of chronic pain, and seizures, on a federal level, it is still classified along with heroin as a Schedule I drug with high potential for addiction and no known medical uses, which means that it can barely be researched. So when doctors prescribe marijuana for things like insomnia or anxiety, they're doing this based off of very little clinical evidence.
So, to summarize the tree person, the politicization of marijuana in the United States has led to a lot of confusion and terribleness, which is awful, but it happens to be kind of terrific if you need excuses for being a stoner. If anyone even hints you might have an issue with weed, you can hit them back with,
are you saying marijuana is some kind of crazy-making drug? Do you realize how misinformed and frankly racist that is?
or with this?
So what, you think marijuana shouldn't be legalized and people of color should just continue going to jail for nothing?
Or with this?
Have you been brainwashed by Big Pharma? Do you not care about the chemo patients? Do you not care about the children with the seizures? I mean, those are all valid points.
I'm kind of starting to feel like you don't want weed to be legalized. No, I absolutely want weed legalized for a number of super important public health and criminal justice reasons. But that doesn't mean that it's fair to insist that weed is this completely non-addictive, holistic miracle herb that is both a super potent cure for everything and completely harmless. I mean, that's just misinformation. And also, by the way, smoking a joint that was hand-delivered to your house by a tired Caucasian girl is just in no way activism. Well, I don't know for whose benefit you're saying all of this, because my reasons for not quitting are completely apolitical. If weed is so harmful, then how come so many super successful people smoke so much of it? Joe Rogan, Sarah Silverman, Seth Rogen, Rihanna. No offense, but I don't think you should be using Rihanna as a benchmark for yourself. And also, it's not like she's successful because she smokes weed. Do you remember when she went to Coachella and rolled a blunt on her bodyguard's bald head? I love her so much. You're not easy to talk to. Well, you are boring to talk to. Maybe you need something to make you a little more fun and creative. Oh, so weed makes you creative. Okay, let me just read you this. This is from a note that you wrote titled, High Thoughts. Fine. High thoughts, life is the tension between what is and isn't. Art is just understanding things really, really well without knowing them. And then you've got 5 exclamation points and oh my God, because I guess you were just so struck by your own brilliance in that moment. Creation is at the edges of awfulness. Death is half of everything that is. Chess is basically... Okay, you can stop now, Jesus. You know, maybe if you weren't so mean to me, I wouldn't need weed so much. So you do need it. I don't need it, but I also don't need to quit. I mean, there's no adverse health effects. It's not even physically addictive, like at all. Well, I mean, that's somewhat debatable, but would you say it's psychologically addictive? Well, what does that even mean? That is a great question. I will be happy to answer that. There is a subreddit for people trying to quit weed called Leaves, because they're trying to leave the leaves. There's a post on this subreddit that I think does a pretty good job of describing what psychological addiction to weed looks like. The correct term is actually use disorder. How come you suddenly know that, miss? Weed isn't even a drug. Anyway, the post is called If Cannabis Was a Girl.
If cannabis was a girl. When you first met her, you couldn't believe how great she was. She made you forget your problems. Food tasted better. Sex was amazing. And even if you were a lifelong insomniac, with her you could relax and sleep for 10 hours. Unlike your ex, Miss Alcohol, she also just left in the morning. You liked her so much that you decided to start seeing her every night. She just kept on giving without asking for anything in return. You dropped an odd friend or two and stopped your healthy diet so you could enjoy the junk food she liked so much. After a few months, you started thinking that life without her just wouldn't be the same, so you decided to spend entire days together. Now she started showing her true colors. She told you to drop more of your friends and family to make time for her, and without even thinking, you did. She told you that you weren't allowed to eat food, fuck, or sleep unless she was there.
You tried to take a break for a week just to realize how deep she had gotten her hooks into you. She was right. You couldn't sleep, eat, or even enjoy a movie without her. But now you knew her for what she really was.
What are you doing? Nothing. Yeah, I just can't do this anymore. I'm just gonna let the end talk to you.
Depending on a substance can feel like a relationship because part of addiction is about our desire to connect. This is a key insight that writer and journalist Johan Hari believes we overlook when we medicalize addiction and just talk about what is going on in the brain chemically.
Human beings have a natural and innate need to bond. And when we're happy and healthy, we'll bond and connect with each other. But if you can't do that because you're traumatized or isolated or beaten down by life, you will bond with something that will give you some sense of relief. Now, that might be gambling, that might be pornography, that might be cocaine, that might be cannabis, but you will bond and connect with something because that's our nature. That's what we want as human beings.
If you listen to heavy users talk about their substance of choice, it'll often sound like they're in love.
Weed is insidious,
Right.
and my true love. I loved it instantly.
They may even mention the moment they realized a certain substance was the one for them.
From the day that I found weed, it was like,
Or talk about how their relationship with the substance interferes with their other relationships.
My wife said that really it was like I had a mistress. you know, who I spent all my time with was the cannabis rather than her.
Or about the heartbreak of losing this relationship.
Well, I miss it. I miss it, you know.
Even though there's a common misconception that marijuana is not addictive at all, these quotes show that some people do in fact become maybe not addicted in the clinical sense, but severely dependent on it. In fact, research estimates that about 9% of marijuana users become dependent, according to the Office of National Drug Control Policy.
Substances can give you a sense of belonging and safety and acceptance. That is, of course, if you're into downers, which is the reasonable adult way to go. If you're a maniac who prefers uppers, then you might get feelings of being kind of glorious and invincible. But the point is that all of these feelings can also happen if you find, say, a satisfying way of expressing yourself, or, God forbid, a meaningful relationship with another person. But with substances, unlike with people, you can get this feeling again and again, whenever you want it, with minimal effort on your part. What I am saying, I suppose, is that substances are sluts. They're brain sluts. They get our synapses all hot and bothered, and then they just give it away. At least in the beginning, because eventually, if the relationship between user and substance is intense enough, it can become abusive. And the substance will go from something the user enjoys to something they need to something they hate to need.
This is making me really uncomfortable, and I don't like feeling uncomfortable. That's growing pains. You know, you're the most prissy, patronizing, obnoxious, self-righteous, overbearing little
And as you move along these stages, a shift in power occurs, from the user to the substance. This is what F. Scott Fitzgerald, the great American alcohol enthusiast, meant when he said, "First you take a drink, and then the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes you." And a similar loss of control sometimes happens with prolonged marijuana use.
When I'm high, I want to quit, and when I'm sober, I want to smoke.
Sober me wants to be high, and high me wants to be sober.
When I have weed, it's easy to imagine quitting. When I don't have any weed, it's easy to imagine smoking responsibly.
This type of post is one of the most commonly repeated ones on the Leaves subreddit. It shows the same kind of splitting that Sad Boy F. Scott described in his alcohol quote, except in this case it's happening for pot smokers. When you're in this stage of your relationship with weed, getting high can often be accompanied with feelings of disgust at the loss of control you're experiencing.
That moment when you are stoned on your bed thinking, what the fuck am I doing, is when you know.
Okay, even if, let's say, hypothetically, I recognize myself in some of the things you're describing, you still haven't explained to me what you think is so harmful about smoking a lot. Well, the main thing the people on the Leaves subreddit seem to find harmful about weed is that it makes them feel okay about things that actually are not okay.
Weed is the remote from click, just fast forwarding and skipping the difficult parts, thus missing everything and everyone you love.
Weed makes it okay for you to go to bed without brushing your teeth. Weed makes it okay for you to spend money you should be saving. Weed makes it okay for you to live in isolation. Weed makes it okay for you to live a passionless life.
This is what writer Bridget Fetisi calls the fuzzy distance, which, it turns out, is also a term in high mathematics. No one cares. Well, anyway, this fuzzy distance you get from being high all the time acts like a type of insulation, like bubble wrap, that protects you from all the difficulties in life and from all of your unpleasant emotions. But the problem with this insulation is that sooner or later, it starts sort of eating away at everything that it was protecting. But don't antidepressants sort of do the same thing? Yeah, marijuana advocates love comparing weed to antidepressants because antidepressants aren't the most elegant group of pharmaceuticals. Their effectiveness isn't universal and they come with a ton of side effects. But the main difference between marijuana and antidepressants is that antidepressants don't cause pleasure. I mean, show me a person who just loves crunching down on their Zoloft or who gets tingly from even seeing a Celexa bar. But marijuana feels really good. And being high feels really good. One of the reasons it feels so good is because it provides your brain with unearned dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain, and one of its main functions has to do with achievement and reward. So, for example, let's say a monkey ancestor of ours 1 million years ago spotted a really juicy fruit at the top of a tree. So he's climbing to get the fruit, and he's climbing, and the fruit is almost within reach, but he's just too exhausted to go on. That's when his brain might give him a little additional spritz of dopamine to give him that extra push he needs. And when he finally grabs the fruit, he might get a little more dopamine to make him feel good and reinforce this behavior. So the problem with constantly dousing your brain with unearned dopamine is that it can create the illusion that your life is totally fine and that you're getting all the juiciest fruit from all the trees, whereas in reality, all you do is lie in bed all sticky, covered in Cheeto dust. Wait, who's that? It's my favorite indica. Look, I really love weed. I really, really love it. And I don't see why I have to quit something I love so much. Maybe I could just be like a high-functioning stoner. That's exactly the problem. That's what makes weed so insidious. Because it's really easy to think of yourself as a high-functioning stoner because weed just isn't as destructive as other drugs. Psychological addiction can take years to develop. Physical withdrawal is brief and pretty bearable. There's no intense hangover or come down after, so there's no sort of built-in punishment with weed. And plus, stoners are such sweethearts compared to, the meth heads and the coke fiends, that the people surrounding them have way less motivation to intervene. How is any of this supposed to make it easier for me to quit? I mean, you're just describing how wonderful weed is. Yeah, but the best thing about weed is also the worst thing about weed.
The thing stoners don't understand is weed possesses absolutely zero short-term flaws. The damage that it does to your life happens slowly, over time, and you'll be too high to notice it. It doesn't ruin your reality. The real danger is it makes you extremely comfortable in your current reality. And that's why a lot of people up here reflect on how they stayed in the same place in life for years because of this habit.
With other drugs, it's easy to fuck up pretty badly. Like, you might total your car while driving drunk, or lose your job because of a bender, or even have a near-death experience overdosing. All of these things are terrible, of course, but they can also serve as wake-up calls. But with weed, there absolutely is no rock bottom.
Being addicted to weed is like pressing the pause button on your life, while time keeps running only to find out later that you pressed that button for years, and you'll never get that time back again.
Do you think I'll be able to smoke again at some point? Maybe. But to be honest, I don't think you or anyone can smoke weed every single day and not become dependent. So for now, the only option I see for you two is breaking up.
Stopping smoking weed is going to make your life infinitely better and is nowhere near as hard as your stoner mind will have you believe.
This used to be my smoke spot. Now it's my banana spot.
I did it. I went to Costco sober.
Smoked today after 6 months sober and can confirm we aren't missing anything.
Hi guys, thank you for watching. If you feel like your relationship with weed is getting weird, I really recommend you check out the Leaves subreddit. It has a lot of helpful advice and support. If you like the video, please subscribe and maybe share it with someone who might find it entertaining or something like that. And if you really want to be extra, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It helps me make more videos like this one. And here are some marvelous people who have done so.